What's up, you guys? It's Peter here, and today I want to cover the subject of career progression as well as salary progression for an effects artist in Los Angeles. Now, is this specific for Los Angeles? The numbers that I'm going to throw out and put into a graph are going to be somewhat specific to Los Angeles, but there are other regions in the world where maybe you can do the conversion based off of the cost of living adjustment for those regions in the world. So take these numbers with a grain of salt and take your own area into account as well. The other thing to note is LA is an expensive area, so maybe these numbers are higher than maybe other areas. So let's get into it. And I also wanted to mention that the data is based on my own personal experience. So I have been interviewing people, negotiating salaries, for many years, both in the feature visual effects industry as well as in advertising. So that's basically where I'm coming from. And I thought I'd share this because I think a lot of artists, when they first start out, or even when they've been when they have been in an industry for a while, might not have a full grasp of what their specific career trajectories might be, as well as what to expect and at what time in their career to expect certain raises or certain promotions, or what the difference is between certain career trajectories. So let's get into it, and I'm going to explain as I go. All right, let's just make this a little bit smaller. All right, so the first thing that we've got here is a very basic graph, and on this side I'm going to note the dollars, and on this side we will have the time amount. So when we first start out, an artist that doesn't have a lot of experience will have literally only a couple of years. So let's say, year zero, you're fresh out of school, you have no experience working in industry. And let's just break this down a little bit. This will be over here, let's say we're going to be 5 years in, here we can be 10 years in, and then here will be, 15 years in. Not exactly drawn to scale, but it's fine. So that first moment over here, when you first start in industry, over here, generally a junior effects artist, so that's somebody oftentimes with 3D skills, will start oftentimes around $50,000. So this is annual, so this is $50,000. Now, if you initially start out, you might not be staff, you might not be salary yet, you might basically be a freelance artist as well. So I'm going to also briefly introduce you to the concept of what is this amount of money representing if we were to do this as a freelancer and you would be paid in an hourly basis. So how would that work? Well, in order to do that, we basically take the 50,000, so it's basically our number, our 50,000, and divide it by 2080, right? And so this will give us the hourly rate. So let's quickly do that. So 50,000 for our start salary divided by 2080, right? So here, that's the amount of hours in a year, and that's $24 per hour, right? So that's not bad, but keep into account that if your salary, you often get additional benefits. You might get a 401k, you might get healthcare, you might get some days off. So those benefits represent a certain amount of money as well. So when you're going to be doing freelance work initially, I'd highly recommend that you should probably take this amount and at least add 25 to 30%. Just to sort of compensate for maybe not having sick days, or for basically paying certain taxes as well. So keep that in mind when you were to do freelance. So I'm going to just annotate this as being freelance if you just start out. All right, cool. So next up, so this is over here. Basically, you've kind of sort of, let's see, this is 4, 3, 2, 1 year in, right? So here 1, 2, 3, 4 years in. So as far as I'm concerned, those first couple of years over here, year 1 to year 2, the assumption is you don't know much yet. You don't know much about how to run your own shots. You probably will get initially some effects assigned to you that maybe the setup has been developed by a senior, and you're going to just take it on and run some of these individual effects elements, which is fine. And you're learning a lot of things at that moment. You're learning how to operate within a pipeline. You're learning how to work in a group, in a team. You're not just by yourself anymore. So in those first 2 years, it's going to be learning a lot of things about operating on the farm, running shots, maybe doing some effects comps, all of that kind of stuff. So that happens in those first 1 or 2 years. So you're considered to be a junior effects artist over here in this area. All right, so next up, once you sort of hit about the 2-year mark, right, that's sort of where let's kick it up a notch, right? So let's make our graph here. So this would be, actually, let's make it a little smaller so that I have enough space in a moment. So here we're gonna have 150K. Oh, oops, that will come later. 100K, and then 150K, and then after that 200K. Right. So let's keep going. So basically, 2 years in, you can expect to get, a little bump into your salary as well. So we're probably going to see if this is sort of the 75,000 mark. That probably will come around, 3-4 years in or so. Let's just put that here at 3 years in. So that's about the 75,000 mark after about 3 years in industry. So at this moment, you are going to become a mid-level artist. So if we take this amount, let's just let's annotate it like this. So here you are a junior. As you kind of keep going after about 2 years-ish, and for some people that's a little bit faster. Here, sort of 3-4 years-ish, you are a mid-level artist. So that basically means you're starting to. So what is the difference? A junior doesn't really do a lot of their own setups yet, but a mid-level artist is going to basically be asked to create their own setups and also deliver final elements. So that means they're going to be doing their own effects comps. They're going to be working with the seniors. They might already be working with some juniors as well, just to sort of handle and manage them a little bit, or just help them out. Like answer questions, all of that kind of stuff. Okay, so then it kind of keeps going up. So basically, after about 5 years in industry, you could expect to sort of start hitting close to that 100K. Maybe let's keep going here. 6, 7, 8, 9. So about 5-6 years in, right? So around here, let's mark it at maybe the 6-year mark or so, right here. We can kind of sort of start to expect people to become more senior, and so they have specific skills. They can really build their own setups. They are now becoming experts at certain things. So that means there is a difference between seniors as well. So that means you have seniors that are focused on maybe cloth simulations or character effects, fur and grooming and all that. And then you have seniors that are maybe focusing on rigid body dynamic simulations, those kind of things. So now there is a difference still between one senior and another senior. Like a senior, sure, in title could be a senior that has, let's say 6-7 years experience. So from here on, right, it basically becomes a senior, right? Now the thing is, as I said, there is a difference between a senior that has like 5 years experience versus a senior that has 10 years experience. Oftentimes, seniors will also be able to create custom tools. So that means either they can create a custom solver of some sort. They might be able to write some Python or some C++ to do some plugin development. So there's definitely more to it than just their own little, their own bubble, their own software. So they start integrating with other things as well. On top of that, the senior will build setups by themselves. So they are expected to deliver final elements, but oftentimes there's, I don't know, these big visual effects movies, they have, hundreds, if not these days, thousands of shots. And so oftentimes they help build setups and build systems that are then handed off to the mid and the juniors, because it's kind of tricky to run a team with only seniors because that's not cost efficient. So you have to have a balance between juniors, mid and senior. So, all right. So after a while over here, like after, let's say, around 7-8 years into industry, this can keep climbing. So let's say, around the 10-year mark, we can kind of put down another notation, sort of, 150K, something like that. Okay, so I'm going to start maybe changing my colors for this a little bit, because we're going to branch off a little bit. So what do I mean by that? Is I'm going to make a difference between what is a senior versus what is a lead. So if we kind of keep going, right, we can kind of sort of see that this graph that I'm drawing, let's just connect the dots. right? It's kind of nicely tracking upwards. And so next over here, the money can continue going up. It might kind of start slowing down a little bit, start plateauing a little bit, depends a little bit, and that depends on a few items. But so let's first see if let's just keep going, right? So basically after, 15, 20 years or so, whatever, this I'm going to start drawing this a little bit flatter, kind of sort of like this. And the reason why is because this can change. So around, well, the senior level can also branch off. So over here, you can kind of start to branch off, right, in what is considered to be a lead. So what's the difference between a lead and a senior? Well, a senior focuses on their own specific setups and the technical portion of it oftentimes, also some of the art, but they're in essence an individual contributor. A lead is a manager. They are going to start dealing with shot management. They're starting to deal with not just one shot, but an entire sequence of shots. They're often managing a team of people. They're managing some juniors, some mid, some senior, and they're working together with the producer and the visual effects supervisor to make sure that everything is kind of working well, that all the people have what they need, and they also oftentimes will interface with production packages like AFTRAK or Shotgun. So that's basically where a lead comes in. And so once you kind of continue down this path, and you've got, let's say, a decade of experience in that, lead over here can become sort of a supervisor. So after this level, right, so here, and I'm gonna just follow the green path, because honestly the senior can kind of continue being a senior for the rest of their life if they want to be an individual contributor and they don't want to manage people. Totally fine. So the lead over here, right, and seniors can make good money. I mean, individual contributors make good money too. Now the lead here is basically going to be turning eventually potentially into a supervisor of sorts. So what kind of supervisor do you have? Well, you have an effects supervisor. So an effects supervisor also sometimes, sure, it could be effects, but could also become a CG supervisor. So we'll talk about the difference in a moment. CG sup. So, all right. So an effects supervisor obviously is focused on handling the effects of a show. That can be, could be for one show, or sometimes could be sort of more of a head of an effects department, where you manage an entire department, and then there's multiple jobs going in and coming in and going out. So at this level, the effects soup and the CG soup as well, oftentimes they will do bids as well. They sit with the producer and they'll have to figure out, okay, this is what the director wants. How can we make this happen? And how much time is this going to take? And who should we use for this? Who's got specific skill sets in the team to sort of handle all that? The reason why I say that the difference between one being on one show versus on multiple shows is that depends on which industry you're in. If you're in commercials, well, oftentimes your facility will be handling multiple commercials at once, versus if you're in a feature, well, maybe there's going to be one effects supervisor per feature. Or if it's a really big feature, you might have multiple CG soups or multiple effects soups handling multiple sequences, right? Just to basically cover all those hundreds of shots that need to be processed. All right, so where can we go from there? So after effects soup and CG soup for a while, we can kind of keep going. And so let's say around the 15-year mark, oftentimes you can kind of stay and be effects soup, but also around this mark over here, around 15 years-ish, could be a little bit less, could be more. This can evolve into becoming a VFX soup, so a visual effects supervisor, and we'll talk about the difference there. VFX soup, also sometimes a DFX soup, a digital effects soup, and we'll talk about the difference about that too. All right, so the visual effects supervisor, I'm sure most of you, that are interested in this kind of stuff, have heard about that. That's basically the person that works very closely with the director as well as with the producer to make sure they're overseeing the entire show, that everything is running smoothly, all the different departments are doing what they need to do, that they're staying on track in terms of time, but also that the vision is corresponding to what the director wants, as well as that there is a sort of a uniform look to it, so that the effects that we're doing at this facility versus the effects that you're doing at another facility are kind of sort of going to tie in with one another, right? So that your superhero in this sequence of shots looks the same as in this other sequence of shots. All right, so that's for the visual effects supervisor. they're basically in charge. They have a lot of responsibility. They tend to work pretty intense, insane hours as well. It's a pretty intense job. Now, the digital effects supervisor is overseeing the show, but more from a technical point of view. So they're going to help figure out the technology side of it. So that means they're going to figure out how can we actually make sure that these shots go smoothly through our pipeline. Which kind of softwares do we want to use for these sequences? And so it's a more of a technical role, and they will talk with the VFX soup and make sure that they're on track, and are we doing maybe certain parts of the pipeline that we're doing in-house, or we're going to do outsourcing. They work with the producer as well, but it's mostly a technical role, right? They figure out a lot of these technical problems and work with seniors and programmers to figure out entire pipelines. So that's sort of digital effects soups. Now let's talk a little bit about this last portion of the curve, right? So how can we get over that 150 to 200K? How can you get higher than that? Because that requires a bit of a shift in your mindset. So over here, how can you get to this really high salary? How can you get there? Well, so that generally tends to involve some form of ownership. And so the first thing that you kind of should sort of think about is, do you as an individual have a stake in the company? So that means, do you get some shares? Do you get some equity? Or is there another way to sort of is it royalties? So oftentimes there is also something called being above the line or being below the line. And what does that mean is, well, if you're above the line, that means you get some kind of revenue from the royalties of the movie or whatever the project was that you've done. So there's sort of a bonus, or I wouldn't say, it's not really passive income. I mean, once the movie is done, it's royalties, it's somewhat passive income, but that's sort of the difference. So, but you take on risk, right? So because if the movie doesn't do so well, then you don't get anything, right? So you don't get to make that money. So that is on top of a base salary oftentimes. So there's a negotiation for a base salary, and then on top of that, there's a sense of royalties as well. Now, that definitely is when you're working as a big name, right? So by that time, you can see we're sort of at a 20-year mark or something in your career. Maybe sometimes that's later. Sometimes you're not just a visual effects supervisor, but you're becoming a director as well. There have definitely been cases in the past where effects artists have done this trajectory, become a lead, become an effects soup, become a VFX soup, and then basically become a director. And so then they can negotiate with the studios to work on a movie, and part of the pay can become in royalties. And so if the movie does really well, you get a lot more money through royalties. So that's sort of where the ownership comes in over here. So you basically start to get equity, shares, royalties, all of that kind of thing. So I think hopefully this gives a little bit of a perspective in terms of a bit of insight into it. The other thing that I want to mention, just to sort of put this in perspective, I looked it up a little bit. So that's this. So according to the US Census, right, this is a sort of a study of lots of people in the US, for the Los Angeles County, and you can kind of find the link over here, and I'll put it in the description down below as well. You can see what the median household was for 2018. And so the median household, so not an individual, was about $64,000. Now the per capita income in the past 12 months was $32,000. So this is the median, right? It's not the average. The average tends to be a lot higher because that will include a lot of outliers, right? A lot of really highly paid individuals, or like that. So here we can also see what is that annual wage, right, in terms of the hourly. Okay, divide by 2080, so that median income here, 64,000, turns into about $30 per hour. And then here you kind of see also the 50 is about 24, 75, 36 per hour, 100 is 48 per hour, 125, 60, 150, 72 per hour, 175, 84 per hour, 200,000 is 96 per hour. So I hope that this graph shows you somewhat that you can make a good living doing visual effects, or effects work at least, and you should negotiate, properly when you do this. So hopefully this was helpful to you. If you found it helpful, Please like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments down below if you found this to be similar for your kind of career progression, or if you found that in certain parts of the world this is completely different. I know that for Los Angeles this is sort of what the career progression you can expect, but maybe in Vancouver or in London or in other parts of the world, San Francisco as well, where the cost of living is quite different, and maybe there might also be the currency conversion to take into account as well. And again, take into account the benefits as well, because in some countries you will have government healthcare, right? In the US, it kind of comes through the company, or your pension savings, things like that. In the US, you kind of have to do that yourself, whereas in Canada, or maybe in London or in Europe, maybe parts of that is arranged by the government. So again, these benefits represent a certain amount of money. So keep all of those kind of factors in mind when you're trying to do a comparison between your own region and what you're seeing over here. So again, hopefully this has been helpful. Please press that like button, and I will see you guys in the next video. Thank you so much.